welcome to this week's episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show. I am Brad, that is Mitch. So it's not just a clever title, people. You see, we are Brad and Mitch. So this week's show, we decided to change things up a little bit. We've gone sci-fi, we've gone horror, we've gone other places that I can't really remember. I have a great memory. This week, we're going Shakespeare, right? With this week's episode, our movie of the week, our new movie review will be The Tragedy of Macbeth, Joel Coen's new film with Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. And so, sorry to kick things off here, Shakespeare inspired. What is your favorite Shakespeare inspired? Doesn't have to be a direct translation of Shakespeare, but just something inspired by Shakespeare.
Yeah, so in looking up a lot of these Shakespeare-inspired films, direct adaptations, and ones that have been influenced by his work, there were a lot of possible candidates that I actually found were kind of influenced by Shakespeare that I didn't know beforehand. But then I saw one that I thought, okay, that is my clear favorite because it's one of my favorite movies. And when I thought about it, of course, it's a pretty direct adaptation of one of Shakespeare's stories, and that's the movie The Lion King. The good one, animated one from the 90s. So we don't talk about the live action remakes. So obviously The Lion King is a almost not exactly direct, but a pretty faithful adaptation of Hamlet, a story of someone who gets outed from their family after their uncle kills their father and then eventually comes back when they're older to save their mother and their family and their kingdom. So this was a pretty, I guess, faithful adaptation of Hamlet in live action, or not live action, animated Disney form.
Yeah, and it's a good, it's one of the best Disney animated, 2D animated films ever. It wasn't until I was a little older that I realized it was a Hamlet thing, till I actually got into Shakespeare. I am a Shakespeare fan. So it wasn't until later I really kind of realized that it drew those parallels. Obviously, it didn't go full Hamlet because you couldn't really go full Hamlet in a PG or G-rated movie. But what about you? When was the first time you ever saw Lion King? Do you remember that experience?
Yeah, since it came out when I was a little kid, I can't really say the first time that I saw it. I can't really remember, but I remember a lot of times since then, and it's always held a special place in my heart. It's a beautiful animated movie. The score, don't even get me started on that, by Hans Zimmer. It's just, I think it's one of Disney's best, if not their best. And I'm not just saying that as somebody who grew up with it. I'm saying that as somebody who has watched almost every Disney movie before and every Disney movie after, and just the level of quality and animation and just everything it has going for it. I think it's really hard to measure up to The Lion King as a Disney movie.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't think Shakespeare, and especially a Hamlet, is go-to fodder for a kids movie, like I just said. And so for them to actually, the writers of this movie, which isn't like us, but I actually don't know the name of the writers of whoever wrote the original Lion King, which shame on me. But it's interesting. It takes a lot of creativity, a lot of talent to be able to take something such as Hamlet, a Shakespearean play that is way more adult than some of his other works. Even it deals with incest, it deals with death and blood and beheadings and everything. I think beheadings, and to tame it down into a kid's movie. And maybe that's good, because as kids grow up, did you ever kind of, as you grew up, realizing that Lion King's based on Hamlet, did that ever whet your appetite to go maybe read Hamlet or delve into Shakespeare's catalog or whatever?
I can't say it really did. I think maybe at one point I might have realized it was based on Hamlet. I've seen it so many times. I've seen it so far back in my life that I can't really say exactly when or really if I kind of realized that it was based off of Hamlet, or if someone told me or I saw it somewhere, maybe even in a textbook learning about Shakespeare in school. So I can't say it made me really want to go back and read a lot of Shakespeare or look up a lot of other Hamlet adaptations. But I think you're right. I still think it's good that it gets these really old stories out there, these classic stories that have really stood the test of time from one of the greatest writers in history of these sort of things, William Shakespeare. So I think it's definitely good that it's out there and it's really getting this different story and message to a different type of audience.
Yeah, without a doubt. You can appreciate the fact that really, it's like they always say, there's three stories in all movies or in all storytelling: man versus man, man versus beast, man versus self. And every story therein comes from it. So, it's interesting to see how every movie ever made can be inspired by something that came before. It just if you and I come up with a similar, like if you and I were to write a Hamlet inspired story, just the two of us would end up writing two completely separate stories. And it's just, it's the type of stuff. It's such a simple concept. Different people come up with different ideas, but it's an intriguing thing because when you do that, when you think about that, you get The Lion King.
Absolutely. So I could gush about The Lion King all day, but that's not what we're talking about here today. So I will say, that was definitely my pick. But what did you kind of pick out as something related to Shakespeare or inspired by Shakespeare, something that maybe one of these that people didn't even know was inspired by Shakespeare?
Yeah, so my movie is actually the movie that made me interested in Shakespeare. It is not an adaptation of Shakespeare. It's not inspired by Shakespeare. It's called Renaissance Man, with Danny DeVito and directed by the late, great Penny Marshall. I believe it came out the same year as The Lion King, 1994. And so this is a story about the army, and it's about a teacher, Danny DeVito, who goes and teaches these army recruits, and he doesn't know how to relate to them until one day they see him reading Hamlet. And all the army people, this was Mark Wahlberg's first movie, but all these army people, they're like, what is that? Why don't you teach us? You're having trouble teaching us. Teach us what you're reading, teach. And so he teaches them Hamlet. He teaches them Shakespeare. And the entire movie is about this guy, DeVito, relating to these kids through Shakespeare. And it's a movie that critics do not like. It is a savage movie by critics. It is one of my all-time favorite. I'm pretty sure I saw it when I was 10. And it is the movie that kind of made me love Shakespeare. And because it delves into it, man. There's a whole thing, in Hamlet, the famous "This above all to thine own self be true." There's a whole scene in that movie where Mark Wahlberg creates like a little rap to that and everything. It's one of those just mid-90s really interesting coming of age type movies. It's got Gregory Hines in it, who I absolutely love as a person who loves tap dancing. Gregory Hines is a god in my book. And it's just this great movie that didn't hit everybody, wasn't a box office hit, wasn't a critical hit, but it hit one person. And that one person was me, because it made me love Shakespeare.
Well, there you go. Everyone has their own opinions in movies. And, I'd argue that's maybe the main premise of our little show, is to kind of take an anti-critic approach sometimes, is that when you just break it down to its simplest form, did movie A really enthrall you and you really liked it and it really meant a lot to you, even if it didn't mean a lot to the critics? So, it's really good to kind of hear that perspective about this one. And I will say, I've heard of this movie. I can't say that I've seen it. So that's something else that I really like about this show and our last one, where again, we just have conversations about movies where we share a personal favorite and the other person hasn't seen it, or maybe sometimes never even heard of it. So, I really like, doing these because I get some good recommendations for movies. So would you say, again, that this is one that you still like, that you would recommend to people, that, you would say to check out, to kind of track down in this age of streaming services where it might be hard to find something specifically?
100%. I even pulled out my DVD. It's not on Blu-ray yet. That's how disrespected this movie is. But I pulled out my DVD because I was actually going to watch it earlier, but I just didn't have the time to kind of give it the rewatch. But I might actually watch it tonight because I haven't seen it in a couple of years, and it's a movie I will watch once every couple of years because it's a go back to movie for me. You know, I absolutely love it, and it's definitely one I think if you get the chance, dude, it's what we sometimes call a Sunday afternoon movie. You know, it's not going to be the movie you invite the girlfriend over to watch at night, or maybe it is, because if your girlfriend, if whoever's in your life, whoever you may bring over to watch a movie, if she likes Danny DeVito or just good feel-good movies, it's a good movie to watch with her, him, mom, dad, whoever you want to watch a movie with. So I recommend it wholeheartedly.
Fair enough. I'll have to take that into consideration. If I can track it down, I'll definitely give it a watch. I'll definitely add it to the list of the many, many specific movies that I still want to watch out there.
All right, so now that we've covered what Shakespeare-inspired films we like the most, we're going to launch into our main segment, Filmography, with Denzel Washington. All right, so in this segment, Filmography, we're going to cover an actor or an actress who is connected to probably our main movie of the day. In this case, it's The Tragedy of Macbeth, starring Denzel Washington. So we figured this was no better time than to cover one of the greatest actors to ever do it, Denzel Washington. So let's launch into it, man. How are you? Where's Denzel sit in your pantheon of movie star?
You know, it's so tough because he's not like your typical movie star, you know, but he is for me in the sense that when I see his name attached to a movie, it automatically adds something to it. You know, it's not just what it's about. It's not who's directing. When I see Denzel's name attached as one of the people who's going to be in it, whether he's the main character or even a side character, although he doesn't do a lot of side characters because he's a big name. But I will say, whenever I see his name attached to a movie, it automatically adds something to it for me, and it automatically adds a certain level of quality that I expect to get out of it. So I wouldn't really call him like this typical A-list celebrity star, whatever. He just doesn't really seem to fit that Hollywood kind of profile. He's just a really talented actor, but I will say his name definitely carries some weight to it for me.
Oh yeah, when you hear Denzel's going to be in a movie, it immediately shoots up the bucket list, if you will, of movies you got to see. Because I was looking through his filmography, and there isn't a movie that he's ever made that I think I out and out hated. And there aren't a lot of actors or actresses I can say that about. But with Denzel, he's smart. He's smart in what he takes and the roles he takes. And you go back even, you know, back into, you know, when he first started, I believe he was on the TV show. It's called Soap Dish, I think. No, St. Elsewhere. St. Elsewhere. I'm an idiot. It was St. Elsewhere, not Soap Dish. But he got his start in, you know, TV, as a TV star in a medical drama, St. Elsewhere. And he just built until he just kind of became one of the biggest stars to kind of ever live. And the Mount Rushmore that would ever be erected of movie stars, Denzel Washington's face is undoubtedly on it.
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting discussion when you talk about who should be on this fictional Mount Rushmore of actors, and is Denzel should be on there. But, you know, I think you could certainly make a case that he should be. Again, it's like you said, he just has this long, storied career, and he's played all these great roles. And I don't really think he's made too many bad movies. I mean, no one's exempt, you know, from making a bad movie every now and then. But again, he's picked his roles really well, and of course, he's done a good job in almost all of them. Again, no one's perfect, but, you know, again, it's just, you can't really fault Denzel most of the time for, if he's in a movie, if it's a bad movie, that the blame is on him for it not being as good, that he certainly brings some great acting quality to it, that he definitely gives it his all. So I can't really think of a movie off the top of my head that was a bad movie where Denzel was at fault for making it a bad movie. I'm not even sure if something like that exists.
I looked over his filmography before doing this, and there wasn't a single movie on there I said, I hate that movie. So and even some of his less reviewed movies are the ones he did with Tony Scott, because those are kind of balls out action movies, and I love them. I love his collaborations with the dearly departed Tony Scott. I mean, they were great action movies. Crimson Tide, Taking of Pelham 123, Unstoppable. I mean, so many just great action movies, which speaks to the type of versatile actor he is, because he can do your romantic drama like A Preacher's Wife. You can do stage productions like Fences. Then he can do these big action, great action movies like these Tony Scott films or The Equalizer. So have you followed his career through those genres? Is there maybe a genre you were like, I like him better in this type of role than that type of role, or yeah?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, Denzel's obviously been around for a long time, started in a lot of different things. But personally, I always love when he's given a grand type of role, where he has to play a larger than life character, or he brings a larger than life presence to the screen, because I think that best fits him, and that really allows him to, again, show off his talent as an actor and a stage actor, because not every actor is a stage actor, and you have to have a certain level of talent to be both. So he definitely fits into those types of roles, I think, even better. And when we talk about the Tragedy of Macbeth later in this episode, I think that is definitely one of those roles. So personally, my favorite role that he played was an Inside Man. Not necessarily his character was my favorite Denzel character, but that was my favorite role that he played, because I liked what he was given, what he had to work with in terms of the actors around him, the story, and just what he brought to the screen. So I would have to say that that's probably my favorite Denzel role, and it's still a good movie overall. I don't think you can really, again, call any Denzel movie a bad movie, but that is definitely, I think, one of my favorite characters that I've seen him play.
Inside Man was a good movie, and it was kind of a breakaway type movie for what you would expect out of Spike Lee. It still had really good social commentary in it, which you expect from Spike Lee, but it almost feels like Spike Lee's most accessible mainstream kind of movie, and that it's a bank robber movie, but it did have, it had those Spike Lee things in it, which it's a Spike Lee movie. It has to have those things in it, but that was a really good movie. It's a good pick for your favorite role of his, and especially in a movie that features it's him, Clive Owen, Jodie Foster. I mean, that's a hell of a cast.
Yeah, and the late Christopher Plummer as well, and Chiwetel Ejiofor, if I'm saying his name right, and Willem Dafoe as well. It's got an all-star cast, and yeah, I agree with you. Can we get another Spike Lee bank robbery movie? I didn't really think I'd be saying that, before seeing this movie way back when, but again, I really liked it, and I thought, yeah, if we can get another one in the same kind of vein, maybe starring Denzel, maybe not. Yeah, I could go for another Spike Lee bank robbery movie.
Well, you're going to need another Spike Lee Denzel one, because they actually did make Inside Man 2, and the trailer looked like absolute garbage. It looked like one of those stereotypical direct-to-video garbage movies, and I assume that's what I never saw it, because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, so obviously, he's had a very storied career, a lot of different roles. So, again, when you're having a conversation like this, I don't think two people are usually going to have the same answer about their favorite Denzel role. So I don't think you're going to say Inside Man either, because, again, there's been so many. So what would you say your favorite role that he starred in has been?
I mean, I always try and go against the grain of popularity, because that's just who I am. I like to go, I'd like to pull out some independent film that he did that I was like, oh, you've never seen that? Oh, well, but in all honesty, my favorite role of his is his Oscar-winning turn in Training Day. I think he played one hell of a bad guy in that movie. I think that is an iconic role, and I'd love it even more when you realize that the line "King Kong ain't got bleep on me" was an improv of his. A line that has gone down in history of movies was an improv, wasn't in the script. That was all Denzel. That just shows you what he brought to that role and why he rightly won the Oscar that year.
Yeah, honestly, hearing that for the first time, it doesn't surprise me at all. I don't mean right now. I mean back when I first heard that was an improvised line. It didn't surprise me at all because leave it to Denzel to come up with something like that on the spot that just instantly becomes iconic. No big deal. The guy does it every day. So try not to kill me through the screen, but I've never seen Training Day. Again, I'm going to add it to this list of movies that I know of that, again, in this age of streaming services, maybe aren't super easy to find because they're so specific. But I will watch Training Day one day, and I will get to check out that Oscar-winning role because, you know, as great as an actor Denzel is, and we keep talking about how great he is, he's only won an Oscar twice. You know, he's been nominated 8 times, but he's only won 2 of them. So it just goes to show you how hard it is to win. You could be great, but it just, if somebody else just ekes you out in whatever year that you're nominated when you gave it your all, you could still lose 6 out of 8 times.
Without a doubt. And it's another, not just the actor Denzel, but the Denzel the person. I don't know if you ever saw his Academy Award acceptance speech when he won for Training Day, but it was that same day that the Academy gave the late great dearly departed Sidney Poitier an Oscar, like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And you know, Sidney Poitier being the first ever African American man to win Best Actor at the Oscars. So when he gets on the stage to accept his Oscar for Training Day, the first thing he says is, "Y'all finally give it to me. You gave it to Sydney on the same day." And it was just like a hilarious line. It got the whole room laughing, and it shows. Honestly, it shows, one, he's hilarious, but 2, it shows how calm he is, and what is essentially probably not a calm point in somebody's life. You think about how many times you watch the Oscars, and people stand up there and they hold the Oscar and they can barely speak. They're crying, they can barely get out, but how calm, cool, collected Denzel Washington is when he steps on that stage and the first thing out of his mouth is just this really hilarious, tension-breaking joke. And that speaks to just who he is. And I love seeing him in interviews and everything because he seems like a great person as well as movie star.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like a really mild-mannered, cool, calm, collective guy. And he doesn't just play people like that in his movies. He actually kind of is that in real life. Just this, you know, veteran actor. He knows what the deal is. He knows how to handle situations and things like that. And it's just, yeah, it makes him come off as like even cooler and even more, you know, calm under pressure, and even more of a talented actor, and just being able to compose himself whenever he needs to. So again, one of the many talents, you know, we're just going to keep singing his praises here in this segment. So what do you think the future holds for him? Because, you know, we've talked a lot about some of his roles, and obviously we're going to talk about him in Tragedy of Macbeth in a little bit, but how much left do you think he has left in the tank? Because I don't really think he's going to slow down anytime soon. He's in his 60s right now, but I mean, you know, you don't have to be in peak physical condition to keep acting. So, you know, we've had a lot of people who have acted right up until they died. So how much left do you think he's got left in the tank?
I think he's going to be going till he's gone. I think he will be. He's acting. I like that he also directs. And full disclosure, I had the chance to work with him last year, 2020, so 2 years ago, if you will, whatever. But I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and they sent out a casting call to work background on his recent directorial film, A Journal for Jordan. And I could have... Background, I wasn't probably going to be dealing with Denzel, but I would have been on a Denzel Washington set. I could have said I was in a Denzel Washington movie. Couldn't do it. Didn't get to work on it, so that was a missed opportunity. So, and hopefully he comes back around with another movie because I'll jump at that opportunity. But yeah, missed opportunity to actually work with Denzel Washington. But I say all that to say, you know, his directorial efforts, it's not like he fully transitioned into director. I like that his directorial efforts are kind of few and far between, which tells me that when he does direct something, it is something he absolutely wanted to work on. I mean, his before Journal for Jordan was Fences and and Antoine Fisher, I believe, was his first one and everything, and then The Great Debaters, I think, was the other one he directed or something. And I appreciate that his directorial stuff, which maybe to your point, not to keep talking so much, but to your point of will he be able to continue until how long will he be able to continue? He's proven himself. If one day he's like, I can't do the acting anymore, he's proven himself a phenomenal director.
No, I 100% agree, and I'm with you. I really hope he keeps doing it until he can't anymore, whether it's acting or directing, that almost like a Clint Eastwood. He just keeps going until we know that he's going to either pass on or just that his doctor is going to tell him to stop. So I'm very much looking forward to that future. Just, again, anything that he's involved with, as I said at the beginning of this segment, it just adds a little something to it for me. So whether it's a movie that he directed or a movie that he's starring in, again, it's probably something that I'm going to check out. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think the average movie fan, maybe people who haven't followed his career as closely, do they maybe feel the same way? Or maybe because he's a little bit older, he doesn't have, I don't know, the draw that he once did earlier in his career? So, I mean, how do you think other people are going to look at the future of his career?
It's a good question. I do think about that. Like, I have my friend's wife has well, she's my good friend as well, but she has kids from a previous marriage, and they're in their, one's 21 and one is 14. And I try and think about, like, do they know who some of these people are? Some of these people I'm a massive fan of are. So I try and see the world through their eyes. And if I were to put myself in their eyes right now, I do believe they know who Denzel Washington is. I think Denzel Washington is somebody who is universal. He's worldwide. And I think he has done enough to where every generation will be a Denzel Washington fan long after he's gone even.
I think it's very well said. I couldn't agree more. So again, I just hope he continues to just be a part of movies in whatever capacity that may be for a number of years moving forward. So very truly a tried and true talented actor, director, what have you. So, you know, do you want to transition here into talking about Tragedy of Macbeth? Just lose a whole bunch of viewers because we're talking about a classic Shakespeare adaptation that is definitely by the book Shakespeare that, you know, maybe not a lot of people have seen here.
Exactly. That's as good a transition as I think you're going to get, because that is a pretty solid point, is that this is such a faithful adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth that I don't think it's a mainstream type movie.
All right, so preparing to lose viewers in 3, 2, 1.
All right, so our new movie review for this week is The Tragedy of Macbeth, the Joel Cohen without Ethan Cohen adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, Tragedy of Macbeth. Yeah, this one was I guess let's give a thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm a fan of that kind of. Let's just launch in before we even discuss it. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Where do you fall on this?
I'm going to say thumbs up because, look, I don't think this is a movie I'm going to watch over and over again, but there are a lot of things I really liked about it, and we'll get into those specifically and maybe what was kind of hard to follow. But I will say that this is a very well-made movie, and, you know, there's some buzz about it being nominated for a Best Picture. So, you know, I think that's totally understandable after watching it. So I will say, yes, I did like it overall.
I'm like 3/4 up. You know, I'm not fully up. I'm not fully. So I'm like kind of up. And again, so to start it off as well, spoiler territory for a story that was written in the 1600s. So you've been warned. Yeah, launching into this movie, I love Shakespeare, as we've already discussed. And so my favorite all-time Shakespeare story is Romeo and Juliet. I think it's not just my favorite Shakespeare story, it's one of my favorite stories of all time. But when I read Romeo and Juliet, I read this version. I read the No Fear version of it. I've read this book numerous times. And what's great about these versions of the Shakespeare stuff is that on this side is the original, you don't have to read it, it's just there, but on this side is the original Shakespeare text, and on this side is kind of the modern day adaptation. So if you're reading along with the Shakespeare book, you're reading the Shakespeare text, and if you're like, I don't really get what doth thou, ist thou, meanest of the, and you can look on the right side or left side and be like, oh, hey, are you coming with me? And it's just like, so it helps with that. This movie, it was Shakespeare through and through, man. It was like watching a Shakespeare play, and that meant it was almost to me like watching a foreign film without subtitles.
Yeah, that is true. I will say that is the thing that kind of prevents me a little bit from going back and watching this again, is that it was pretty difficult to understand that, even with the volume up and paying attention to every little word, it was kind of hard to understand sentence to sentence what the characters were saying. And as long as you listen closely and kind of pay attention to what's going on screen and characters' actions, you could follow along with the story. But again, yeah, it was just when you take a literal Shakespeare adaptation and put it on screen, since 500 years later, give or take, not everyone talks like that. Yeah, it's a little tough to follow, and that might take some people out of it. But for me, I still enjoyed it. Again, it was just you really had to pay attention to follow along.
Without a doubt, you had to 100% pay attention. And I think that speaks to how great the acting was in this movie. Because even if you didn't understand what the hell was going on from the dialogue, you knew what was going on from the acting and the filmmaking side of it. You kind of were able to follow along. I mean, the story of Macbeth is a fairly simple story. It's about a man who raises to the level of king by murdering the previous king, and then lets the power of his kingdom go to his head and just all out murders everybody, really. And so it's a simple story, but it's a good one. And you are able, I think if you just have that simple log line in your brain and you can follow along with the acting and the set pieces, you're able to follow this movie till it's over.
I think so. I think, again, this isn't going to be a $1 billion movie that mainstream audiences really saw in waves, but for someone who appreciates a film like this, who appreciates Shakespeare or a more kind of artsy movie, yeah, I think they would still enjoy this one for sure. And again, I certainly did as well. Don't let us starting off on that whole it was hard to understand thing really, make it sound like we didn't enjoy this. I certainly didn't. It sounds like you mostly did as well. I really loved the way this was shot. I honestly didn't mind the black and white, because it's something that you don't even notice after a while. That, again, when I feel like a movie these days uses black and white, sometimes it's kind of used as a gimmick to make it seem like it's more artsy when it's really not. But I honestly thought it fit the story and fit the time period, but it didn't distract too much. So I think the visuals really sold this, where it might be a little bit hard to follow with listening to the dialogue.
Without a doubt, and I fully appreciated the black and white and the 4:3 aspect ratio of it, because that kind of brought me back to an old school type movie, something like, was it Zack Snyder's Justice League, where he did it in 4:3, where I'm just like, all right, I don't understand why you did this in 4:3. That didn't make any sense to me. But this movie made perfect sense for me, and the cinematography for this, I think it's a shoo-in to be nominated, if not win, although I do think Dune is going to take that award. But without a doubt it's going to be nominated, because it really felt like a play come to life. It felt like they had filmed a play, which is a compliment, and I hope it sounds like a compliment, because that's how I mean it. It felt like we were watching, in the audience, Macbeth on stage.
No, honestly, you took the words right out of my mouth, where, again, this felt like a high-budget play that was filmed and then made into a movie. And again, I mean that as a compliment, too, where you took some really good actors in some good-looking but not big-budget sets, with some really good acting on display and a really classic story with really classic dialogue, and you made a movie out of it. So it definitely does feel like a stage play put to screen, but in the best of ways, that it's very high quality. It's very artsy. It's very easy on the eyes. It's very well acted, of course. So I definitely think this was kind of like that. You're watching a very well acted, maybe not a Broadway show, but just, something like that, and just put that on screen. I definitely feel like that's what this was.
Well, yeah, 100%. And it's kind of like you said earlier, man. It is a good movie, but I do see this for me as a one and done. I watched it, I enjoyed it for the most part, but I saw it. It's good, one and done.
Yeah, and I agree. You can have movies like that you really enjoy, that you can really appreciate the talent and the craft and the hard work that went into them, but that you don't necessarily want to rewatch 50 times, like a favorite movie that has action and other stuff going for it where it's very rewatchable. I can still really appreciate this movie and still think, wow, this looks beautiful and it's very well acted and it's a great Shakespeare adaptation, but I don't want to watch it 50 times because it does have a lot of those good things going for it, but it's not bingeable as you have a lot of things these days. So, you can still respect all that and still not want to just rewatch it over and over again.
Oh yeah, and to credit the acting too, it's you have Denzel, you have Frances McDormand, you have Brendan Gleeson, but I don't know the person's name who played the witch in this. Tremendous job, creepy voice that they brought to that role and everything. I thought I was sold from that in the very beginning of that witch role.
Yeah, whenever you have the witch or witches, I guess, depending on how you interpreted it on screen, that's definitely another very interesting visual moment in an already very interesting visual movie where you have the witch kind of contorting or speaking or maybe black against a white background. It's very interesting when you have these shots come up, and they definitely captivate you versus when other characters are speaking. And again, we said earlier, you definitely still have to pay attention to follow along with this movie, but I think the witch parts definitely pop up as more visually engaging and more captivating with whatever's going on at that point in the story, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so let's see, if this going forward, how like in school your English teacher tells you to read Macbeth and you go and you're like, I'll just rent the movie. You think this movie gains traction as the go-to movie version of Macbeth for future students who don't want to read it?
I think so. I could see this in classrooms in the future being shown as kind of a treat, a change of pace from just reading in class all day and reading for homework, where, you take a break and you watch. It's a very faithful Shakespeare adaptation. So I don't know why teachers wouldn't want to show it as a possible Macbeth showing in class, but I think this could very well be a candidate going forward for movies in schools where they want to teach something as well, because again, it looks great, very well acted. Everyone knows Denzel. So again, I think this could be a very viable movie that they show in school going forward when you want to learn and talk about Macbeth.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, a nice, substitute teacher comes in and is just like, just watch this movie. All right, I'm going to be at my desk.
Yeah, I mean, that's what substitute teachers do. And, you could do far worse than this movie. I've watched far worse movies, both in terms of what I actually learned from them and the degree of movie compared to this one in school. So I think, again, you could do far worse than this. So I definitely think this is a movie that you could just turn on in class, again in English, not even a substitute, when the main teacher is in class, that you could still learn a little something and keep your students engaged.
Yeah, sounds good. So I guess at the end of the day, it is a good movie. It already has been nominated for some awards. Denzel got a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination recently for this, and I do believe he'll pull out the Oscar nomination. I also believe he'll get a cinematography nomination. Whether it breaks into the bigger categories, we'll see. I haven't seen the reviews for this one yet, so I'm not entirely sure what the overall consensus of the actual film is, but we'll see. But it was a good movie, but it's one of those movies that's good, but I saw it and I'm good to go.
That's fair, and I agree with you. I think, honestly, this is going to be a shoo-in for a lot of Oscar nominations, and part of it is because, again, this movie did a lot of things really well, and it's a kind of classic Hollywood look and feel type of movie, which Hollywood's going to love, but also because I feel like 2021 was a little slow with movies. We haven't really quite gone back into the swing of things where you had a lot of major releases in 2021 where there is a lot of competition against the Tragedy of Macbeth, where you didn't have quite as many movies towards the early part of 2021 or even some towards the later part. I know a lot of Oscar bait movies usually come out around the fall, winter, of one year and then the next. But again, we really didn't have maybe quite as many movies as years past still come out in 2021, as we have in the past because obviously of the pandemic. So I think this one is definitely going to be a shoo-in for a handful of awards and hopefully ones that it definitely deserves. And who knows? I mean, Denzel, again, since he did such a good job in this movie, do you think this could be Oscar win number 3? Finally hit the trifecta? I mean, what do you think about that?
I don't think he's going to pull the win on this one. I think you got Andrew Garfield coming up for Tick, Tick, Boom, just getting a lot of good press, rightfully so. Excellent movie. And other people whose names escape me, but in terms of the SAG award, it's not who I'm probably going to be voting for. I can tell you right now, lead actor, you have Bardem for being the Ricardos, Benedict Cumberbatch, Power of the Dog, Will Smith, King Richard. That's who I think is going to win this year. I think it's going to be Will Smith's year. So I don't think this is going to be win number 3 for Denzel, but I do think Denzel will have a win number 3 not in the not too distant future.
Sure, well said. And I think anything's possible. I might agree with you where it might be tough for him to win it this year. It seems like the path is just a little bit tough. Again, he's, as always, against some tough competition because even if it was a little bit of a slow year for movies in 2021, we still got some great ones and some great acting, of course. So I think you're right. I think it's going to be a little bit tough for him to win. Would I like to see him win? Of course, because he certainly deserves it. He did a great job with this movie. Like we talked about earlier in the episode, he's having a very long, illustrious career. So would I be mad if he won it? Absolutely not. But would I be surprised? Maybe a little bit.
I mean, yeah, if we're talking about like Denzel performance, a couple years ago, he was nominated for Fences, and he was absolutely phenomenal in Fences. I thought that was a performance to be studied. Just so happens that year he went up against Casey Affleck, who gave, for my money, one of the all-time greatest performances in Manchester by the Sea. And so it really is, like you said, man, any year there could be just Fences, Denzel here. Casey Affleck he's touching. It's not even like a gap. He's touching it with the greatness. It was just that little extra of Casey Affleck and Manchester that got him the win over Denzel that year.
Yeah, it's like we said earlier, obviously 8-time nominee, 2-time winner. Just sometimes he can do an excellent job, or just anybody besides Denzel, you could do an excellent job acting and maybe in a different year easily win an Oscar, but some years somebody just has a once-in-a-lifetime performance and just kind of steal it out from under you. So I'm looking forward to it. I always like watching the Oscars. I always like, even if I know all the movies, just finding out some more things that I didn't know about them, or being introduced to movies that I haven't really heard of quite yet when the Oscars roll around. So I'm very much looking forward to the ceremony and just seeing what will win, what's up for it, and just, being introduced to a lot of maybe great new actors, new movies. So I'm very much still looking forward to it.
Which I'm sure we'll cover on this show, do a little Oscar special potentially. But to bring it back around to Tragedy of Macbeth, to your point, this is a movie that it's a streaming movie. It's on Apple. So perhaps once these nominations come out, and if Tragedy of Macbeth makes that short list, it will be found because people can. It's not like they have to make the special trip to the theaters. They can throw down $9 for a month of Apple Plus and enjoy it in the comfort of their homes, even though I am a true proponent of the theatrical experience. And if it is playing around you, go to the theater. Especially the cinematography from this one probably looks, full disclosure, I watched it on Apple Plus, so I'm a hypocrite in the truest sense here. But the cinematography on this probably looks fantastic on the big screen.
No, I agree. I watch this at home too, and part of it is just ease and comfort. But, I definitely would say if you're interested, to definitely watch this on the big screen, and you'll certainly thank us later because, again, beautiful movie, shot, acted really well. It just, you will definitely get your money's worth out of that. So, and that's part of why I, again, love Oscar movie seasons, because when it starts to roll around, they offer some of these movies again in theaters if they haven't already. So that's why I partly love that season, is because I can go back and see some of these that I haven't on the big screen, which is just, no matter what type of movie it is, no matter who's in it, is just, by my account too, is a much better experience than just watching it at home. So very much looking forward to that. And maybe I'll go and check out Tragedy of Macbeth on the big screen just to see if I get anything different from it on the big screen versus at home.
Without a doubt. So yeah, Tragedy of Macbeth, it's worth your time, which is a pretty glowing review, I would say.
Absolutely. I would highly recommend it as well. Even if you're maybe not usually up for this type of little bit more artsy movie, I would say it was definitely worth checking out.
All right. So that will conclude this week's episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show. We covered some pretty solid topics, mainly all dealing with some quality Shakespeare, nothing to be topical like a 600-year-old writer. But we also covered the great Denzel Washington. We covered a brand new movie for everybody to go out and see. So solid episode all around. I hope you agree. And as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, smash those like buttons, smash the subscribe button, tell your friend, leave a comment too, whether you like us or hate us, man. We'll interact. We got nothing better to do. And so with that said, also, if you're listening to this, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. We definitely appreciate it. Hopefully our voices are soothing to you. So with that said, next week's episode will be something different. How about you tell us what we're going to be doing next week, Mr. Mitch?
Yeah, so we're going to be switching gears again, keeping it fresh, just covering all these different areas of movies. So we're going to be talking about, of course, a football-related movie with the Super Bowl coming up soon. So we're going to be covering American Underdog, which is a biopic about quarterback Kurt Warner. So very interesting movie. I'm looking forward to discussing that one. So hopefully tune in next week for that as well.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I have not seen it yet, so I try and watch a bunch of football-themed movies around the time of the Super Bowl. So that'll be a good discussion for us to have when we do that. So I hope everybody enjoyed this week's episode. And so for Mitch and Brad's Movie Show, I'm Mitch. No, I'm Brad. That's Mitch. I can't believe I screwed that up, but I did. What are you going to do? Anyway, have a good week, everybody.